Good afternoon. Welcome to the Transitions webinar number 11, Rebranding Workers' Compensation. My name is Dr. Claire Musselman, and I am a co-founder of the Transitions and the Vice President of the Work Comp Center of Excellence at North American Risk Services. Today, I am joined by a leadership panel stemming across the industry from various perspectives, backgrounds. Oh gosh, everybody's got so many different backgrounds within this. It'll be fun to go through and dive into this. Today, we're looking at the of workers' compensation from an internal perspective as well as an external perspective, looking at differences in how we talk, the words we use, who we attract into this space, and what tangible items we can take away from this today. I'd like to start out by introducing our panel, and I'm going to start with Mark, the RX Professor, Pugh.
Thanks, Claire. Thanks for inviting me. I am also one of the co-founders of the Transitions, been in work comp for a long time, and excited to be a part of this panel and talk about what we need to do differently.
Thank you, Mark. Mr. Carter.
Hi, Claire. Thanks for inviting me as well. It's a pleasure and honor to be here. I'm Ron Carter with RX Bridge. I'm just a techie that probably not even supposed to be here, but hey, I'm here and I'm going to contribute as I can.
Thank you. Ms. Laura Gomez.
Hi, I'm Laura Gomez-Thomas, Vice President of Claims for a wonderful, great InsurTech company known as Foresight Risk and Insurance Services. It's a pleasure, honor, and thank you for inviting me to be a panelist among all these prestigious peers that we have on the panel.
Thanks for being here, Laura. And last but not least, the baby of the group, Mr. Scott Yasko.
Thanks, Claire. Not many people call me baby, but I appreciate it. So my name is Scott Yasko. I'm from Preferred Medical. And again, I'm just happy to be here, excited to contribute to the conversation. So thanks very much for the invitation.
Awesome. Well, we're going to dive right in. I'm so happy that everyone kept their bio short, sweet. 2 minutes in, let's roll. So today we're talking about the brand of workers' compensation. And since each of our panelists have a very different background and different experience throughout the industry, I'd like to get each person's perspective on how workers' compensation is perceived. So I would like to start with Mr. Carter. Ron, could you give us, you've been in the PBM space, you're also considered a techie. Can you give us some of your perspective on your journey through the workers' compensation industry and the perspective that you have as a result of the interactions that you've faced throughout the industry?
I definitely think that my perspective on the workers' compensation industry is interesting. I'm a techie. I was born and raised a techie. I kind of think about it from how do I explain it to my kids is the best way to kind of frame my perspective on it. And, you know, my kids have seen me go from the group health space from a PBM perspective. I've worked in the insurance model. I've worked in the financial sector. So I've kind of worked in a lot of different sectors when it comes to technology. I think it's no surprise to anyone that everybody says from a technological perspective, the workers' compensation industry is 10 years behind the group health industry, and group health is 10 years behind every other industry. So it's, the perspective of workers' comp is kind of a dated, kind of an aged, kind of we're doing things the same way today that we've done them for 50 years. I jokingly say that people say that this is where good ideas come to die. It's just not, an industry that is considered sexy or bright and moving. But, thanks to folks like you and others in this roundtable, I see the pendulum swinging, and I do see innovation as a real topic, which is obviously interesting to anyone coming into the space. And I see just doing things differently as a new way of thinking. Which is changing the old guard, changing the way we look at problems, just sometimes just the fact that we are looking at problems and not ignoring problems is a new way for the industry. So, bad news, good news. Bad news is we have a long way to go because we are an archaic industry. I think Jurassic Park has been thrown around at times, but at the same time, the pendulum is swinging, and this is a very exciting time to be a part of the workers' compensation family.
Awesome, thank you. I'll come back to the why, but I want to get everyone's perspective first. So, Laura, you have also kind of have that tech side background, but I'd love to hear your perspective as well as to the brand of workers' compensation throughout your experience in this space?
You know, my experience started being a daughter of an injured employee. My dad actually was injured around 40 years when he was about 40 and was unable to return back to work. So it changed the dynamics of our family. And one of the things that I saw was, wow, you know, dad's here, he's the here he is the breadwinner, and he was unable to be that breadwinner. So it did affect the family. We have a wonderful supporting family. And through that, by chance, I don't know how I got into workers' comp. I was applying for one position, ended up actually someone said, you know, with your traits and your knowledge about workers' comp, because I also interpreted on behalf of my parents, you know, I have someone to go to actually would love to meet with you. I met, hired, and I entered the world of workers' comp. And what I have learned is back then, it was people oriented. You know, I am a baby boomer, and it was more people. What can we do for that injured employee? As I have gone through the 1990s, the 2000s, oh my goodness, I'm aging myself. You know, what happened is it became more process oriented than people oriented. Our industry we were looking to, or actually currently are, we need to be in compliance. We must meet these diaries. We must meet X, Y, and Z. And they forget about the face of the people that they're serving. And those are the injured employees, the insured, and even sometimes ourselves. So because we also have all these timelines that we must, you know, comply with, or there's a monetary penalty if we do not follow through on certain requirements or are in compliance with certain policies and procedures. So the brand today, I feel, has become more process oriented, more compliance oriented, less people oriented. And those are the ones that we serve, our businesses and our injured and their valued resource, their valued employees when they are injured on the job. And I really thank the transitions and Claire going out there and advocating and saying we need to change. And I'm listening more and more how we are changing and saying, let's take care of that injured employee, their wellness, their recovery. Let's focus on that. So the fact that I'm listening, I'm attending, and now I'm being part of the panel to hopefully be part of that solution to rebrand our workers' comp and think about the humanizing our system and really having that human connection back again. I'm excited, Claire. I'm very excited of where we are today and where we're going to go in the future.
Thank you, Laura. Great answer. Scott, you come from a different background. So I come from the claims adjusting background. Scott, come to us with yours.
Yeah, so I'll just say this. I mean, the question, right, is what do we think the brand is of work comp? I think the answer to that is probably twofold. And the biggest issue is that if you're not in work comp, you probably don't realize that there is an industry and that there is a brand, right? So it's just non-existent, I think, to people outside of our industry, and that's an issue. You know, inside the industry, I think Laura was spot on in terms of how processitized everything has gotten. I mean, it's process, widgets. And we forget that there are people on the other side of this. And so when it comes to the brand and sort of livening it up, I think that there is a two-pronged issue that we have to address. It's getting people outside the industry to come into the industry. How do we make it attractive to those folks? How do we make it young and hip and cool for people to jump into work comp or insurance or claims? Or, you know, for me on the managed care side and looking at the vendor side, we need a lot of help there as well. I mean, we're all aging out. You know, Claire likes to say all the time that 10 years ago, her and I were the youngest in the industry, and 10 years later, we remain some of the youngest in the industry. That's a huge issue. I mean, 10 years has gone by, and we haven't seen anybody to come in with younger faces than us. So I think we have a lot to address, and I think we have a lot to sort of get out of that stigma of being a crusty and rigid sort of industry, and sort of to what Ron was saying, we need to evolve. We need to be out in front of these changes and be more proactive with them. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, thank you. And last but not least, the RX professor.
Well, speaking of crusty, I was there with Moses when he handed down the 10 Commandments for workers' comp. I actually started as a techie, so I'm compatriots with Ron and Laura on that. But I got engaged in work comp back in 1990 as a part-time consultant building software for a UR company, and joined full-time in 2000. So I've seen a whole bunch of changes over that time. When I first started looking at opioids in 2003, most people were kind of denying the fact that we were over-prescribing pills for a bunch of people, and really didn't want to buy into that. And then when I started talking about cognitive behavioral therapy in 2011, it was like I had three heads, because it goes, we got we're opening Pandora's box by opening up psych as a compensable diagnosis. And so I have seen this transition. I believe as well that there's process orientation, but I've seen the softening of the heart, of the mind, of workers' compensation, as people understand that we've got to deal with both the physical and the emotional, the psychological, the psychosocial, the biopsychosocial, and the spiritual component of that. Because when you come down to it, these are people that are human beings that are built of everything that we're built of. And I know a couple of y'all, Laura, you mentioned your father was an injured worker. Claire, you've been an injured worker on a couple occasions. It's interesting to see from the injured worker's perspective how you're treated or not treated, how you're communicated with or communicated over, because of all the acronyms and all the crazy stuff that we do. And I think people are starting to come to realize that there's a return on investment on treating them as human beings and treating the entire entire person. Because if you don't treat the entire person, now you're going to have those legacy claims, those old dog claims of people that never get any better, that you can't really find any reason for until you dig into the fact that they were abused as a child, or they have interesting social determinants of health, or they have issues with authority, or their family business is workers' compensation. They don't know how to do anything other than get hurt. There's just all these different things that go into play, and all of a sudden you look back and you can't close these claims, you can't settle these claims, you can't get rid of these people, because there's something wrong that we have ignored if we just focus on the biomedical component. And so, Claire, you've done an excellent job over the past several years in talking about centers of excellence and the recovery. And it's really important to understand this whole person. And I think when we talk about branding from work comp standpoint, if we focus on that we are in the business of helping people at maybe the most difficult and challenging time of their life to get their life back together, and we're facilitating, we're moderating, we're helping guide them through that process, that is something the younger generation really likes. If you're on the audience, you should see a post here shortly of a video that I had recorded with Tandeka Nambeta, who's also on the advisory council for the Transitions Mentoring Program. By the way, we've got a mentoring program. It's really cool. But Tandeka took both the yes and the no answers to whether work comp is even relevant or attractive to the newer generation. And interestingly, she had an answer for yes and an answer for no. But that was a part of the National Work Comp Disability Conference session that I co-hosted with Stuart, and we recorded the videos. And you can click on the video and watch it, but she's got some interesting nuggets in there and how we can attract the new generation. But I think distilling it down, if we focus on ones and zeros, dollars and cents, instead of the whole person and helping them through a very challenging time, if we focus on the latter, we will not have any issue bringing people into the industry, because it builds purpose, it builds mission, it helps achieve a common goal. I'm kind of Mr. Spock. I've got the technology background, and I'm a preacher's kid, so I'm also Captain Kirk. So I've got kind of both heads on that, and that's what I've tried to kind of.
That you're referencing. Who?
Oh yeah, for the younger generation, it's Star Trek, not Star Wars. They don't have the little robots, just the blue shirts. The red shirts, just to let you know, if you're in a red shirt, you're immediately killed when they go down to the planet, and it's a spoiler alert. So if you're not familiar with Star Trek, Google it. I'm sure it's out there. But the linear, logical thinking of Mr. Spock and the emotional kind of Captain Kirk is really kind of where we're all at. We want rationality, we want logic associated with it, but there's always a lot of emotion that comes from very challenging circumstances. So I see hope in the work comp, because I have opening towards treating people as opposed to just claimants.
Thank you for that. All right, so I've got to ask, so you guys all gave really good examples. I want to go back to Ron and Laura specifically for this next one. So we talk about, this is a very process-oriented industry. We shifted from people to process, and I personally believe the industry profits on human suffering, and I just won't be a part of that. So that's where I think a lot of our shift has come from, and those who have moved into like the workers' recovery or work comp center of excellence, workers' empowerment, advocacy, you name it. It's all about like doing what's right for the people, and then the cost benefits follow that. But specific to Ron and Laura, why do you think we went more into a process-oriented industry versus people? And to Ron, I want to ask, so you've got the experience with personal health care versus workers' compensation and having a dab in both. Do you see a different approach into how we treat people on the personal health care side versus the work comp side? And why do you think it is that way?
There's definitely a difference in how we treat people on the other side of the fence. The models are completely different. Having worked in both models, workers' comp seems to begin with an entire gate that says, we're going to make sure you're not fraud. We're going to make sure that you're checking these boxes because everything is assumed to be a bad claim to begin with. If that's our mother, if that's our aunt, if that's our wives, our husbands, we treat it as there's an injury that needs to be taken care of. It is definitely, it's a healthcare event. But from a workers' comp perspective, it's not a healthcare event yet. It's an insurance claim event first, and then healthcare is kind of after the fact. Once you've made it through all the boxes that need to be checked and all the gates that need to be hurdled. And I think that's why we've seen it, and everybody has seen it, as more of a process mentality, that it doesn't matter what's happening. Once you have a claim, here's what you do. You jump this bar, you jump this fence, you fill out these forms, you kind of go through this process. Meanwhile, you're bleeding, right? So you need some health care. So I think that's the major difference on the group health side. Group health side is more treatment and care oriented first and foremost. Even if I go tactical and talk about the formularies in a group health environment versus the formulary in a workers' comp environment, from a PBM perspective, the formularies are yes, no, you can't have these, you can't have these. But in the group health side, it's completely different. It really is more inclusive on the group health side. Now, it has its share of issues because that's more rebate driven, but that's a whole nother conversation. But I think the transactions are oriented that way because it's an insurance claim transaction. And regardless of whether your fraud is on average 3% or 18%, the 100% of the claims are treated as, here's what we have to do to make sure that we don't have a fraudulent claim and that things are being done right. So that's where I see it from my perch on the transaction management and the process management side of it versus the human experience that we should be looking at. The human experience and what's going on with what's going on with that police officer at 2 o'clock in the morning, what's going on with that truck driver at 1 o'clock in the morning in the middle of Idaho, what's going on with the humans and getting them back to work. Because for the most part, a lot of these folks want to get back to work. They're not trying to stay out of work. They're not trying to defraud the insurance company. They actually want to get back to work. And I think if we shift the change and change the model where we're trying to help them from the beginning, then we see a more care-oriented model versus a transaction-oriented model.
Yeah, and so statistics show that hard work comp fraud of fake claims that are being submitted is 1%. And then the malingering or the advantageous type claims, the soft fraud that comes in, can be up to 30%. And a heavy root cause of that is the relationship with the employer. So I always find that fascinating because I firmly believe, based upon my research and my doctoral research, that if you have a good organizational culture, your workers' compensation program is going to be solid. And if you don't have a good organizational culture, for example, some of those that I've experienced in my lifetime that come to us that say, well, all work comp is fraud. Yeah, I don't want to insure you. I'm not interested in that because that means that your culture is terrible. And so it's probably not fun to work for you anyway, let alone try and have a work comp claim with you. So we're going to go ahead and go talk to the underwriter on that one, but sounds good. So Laura, you get to be on this side and you talked about how we've gone from process to people, or we've gone from people to process. Why?
Legislators, pretty much our legislation has said you must do X, Y, and Z. We are administering state benefits. That's what we're doing. We administer state benefits. And most unfortunately, what our legislators have written is, compliance regulations that you must do. So our insurance carriers and everyone else has to, or else there's a monetary fine. And what we have done is, and it's all time driven too, basically, because their intent was good, their intent, but there's unintentional consequences of some of the legislation that has been written out across the states. And what we have done, being in the InsurTech company, which I tend to be very excited about with Foresight, our focus is one, safety. So every one of the culture is safety first. Every one of our insureds must bind with our safe site, which basically at a touch of a button, they can go out and have meetings, whatever language, and let's make sure the culture is, let's keep a safe workplace for our employees, because we don't want those claims. We want those employees to continue working for the employer. Now, once the claim occurs, actually at time of onboarding, we are talking to our insureds about if someone has an injury, is it, oh my gosh, you got injured? What's the behavior like? Hey, I'm sorry you got injured. Here's what we're going to do for you. So we have incorporated or trying to humanize that touch point from day one, having a workplace safety where identifying loss exposures so that they do not get injured. And once they're injured, let's take care of them. Let's take care of them. And the technology, claims kits. I don't know how many of you have dealt with claims kits, but they used to be about 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pages long. With our technology, we're down to 1 page. It's wonderful when you have individuals in our community out there that have never experienced a work comp, and we provide them the contents and they say, hey, I think this will work for you, and I said, this is awesome. This is the end goal. So we have these wonderful individuals coming on board that have these different backgrounds in our InsurTech world that is looking at experience, saying we want to humanize this process. What can we do in our tech world is facilitating that, Claire. It is just, I am just very excited about the position that I'm in and what we can do differently to cut out those processes, because every process is a monetary cost to the bottom line. QMEs, IMEs, deposition, all those things are a monetary cost to the overall claim. You don't even have to touch a claim, and just because of the process, all of a sudden you've incurred $25,000, $35,000 on that claim. And then the other thing, Ron, what I was always curious about is, why are there 2 patterns of treatment for the same diagnosis, industrial and non-industrial? Never can figure that one out. But that's where we're at, Claire. There's 2 patterns of treatment for the same diagnosis. And in, again, workers' comp, you have all these different processes you have to go through for whatever reason. But we are, with this wonderful panel here, I'm sure, and our industry as a whole, I think we'll find some solutions to some of those questions that I have.
Ron, do you want to respond to the 2 patterns of treatment for the same injury?
Yeah, there's more than 2, and if you take a broken arm and look at it across workers' comp, look at it across Medicare, look at it across group health, look at it across the VA, look at it across all of the different payment verticals, and it gets even more interesting, because you can have the same injury treated by the same doctor, and then if you take that same injury by the same doctor, and let's just remove the variables and say all of them are 32-year-old males, that then you come up with 7 different treatment guidelines because of the payment vehicle behind the injury. So it's not just one, it's not just two, it's multiple, it's several. And out of that, there is a best approach. But definitely, you're right. There's multiple treatment guidelines across the same injury, and it really shouldn't be.
Yeah. So Laura, I want to follow up to something that you said. You talked about safety being a huge component, and I'm stealing this from Foresight a couple weeks ago. They posted this quote, and I love it because I've saved it. So safety is today recognized as an economic necessity. It is the study of the right way to do things. And I really like that. It's by Robert Campbell. He's the chief legal counsel of the steel industry and first president of the National Safety Council. But I love that. Safety is the study of the right way to do things. So I think that's pretty awesome. And I appreciate Foresight for sharing that. So kudos to them. So Scott, when you look at the why, you said that you and I were the youngest 10 years ago. Let's be real, it was almost 20. I'm basically still a teen mom, even though I joke that I'll have a teenager here tomorrow. So that won't be relevant anymore. But about 20 years, why? Give me the why.
Why, as in why there's nobody else
Yeah. Why
that's coming into the industry?
the last ones that entered.
So, you know, and it's one of those things. I think I get asked the question all the time, and it's something that we discussed within this group just a couple of days ago. Is, you know, what sort of attracted you to the industry? And I think one of the issues is like most, nothing attracted me to the industry. I fell into it, and I think, I don't know if I can speak for everybody on this call, but almost every single person I speak to in work comp, they just fell into it, and we haven't made it attractive enough. You know what I mean? We don't want people to fall into it. We want people to be attracted to it. And that means we got to be the ones that are proactive about it. And so we're not hip. We're not cool. You know, when people think of jobs coming out of college, they want to go somewhere, especially these newer generations, where they feel like they can make a difference, where they can make an impact. Someplace that might be the most attractive due to the benefits or due to, you know, the cool office that they have going. Whatever the fact is that we're not getting them, we're not getting them. And the thing is let's take the example of somebody wanting to, you know, make a difference in somebody's life. This is the perfect industry to do that, but people don't realize it. People don't realize it because, again, we've gone from people to process. And, you know, I have my own views on sort of why that happened. I mean, you can sort of harken that back to the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. The early 1900s was sort of the jumping off point to the work comp industry. It was sort of this deal between, you know, people getting hurt and protecting those workers to make sure the conditions were right, and the legislators and sort of business owners that also didn't want to get sued when things went wrong. And so it was supposed to be this grand bargain. But at the end of the day, when the people in power continue to make the decisions, and they make the decisions, and they make the decisions, and sort of what Laura was saying, the legislators get involved, things get a little quirky, and things get a little bit more tied down when it comes to process. And so we have to get away from focusing on the process and back to focusing on the people. Because I will say, my generation, the generations after me, we are a little bit more, quote unquote, touchy-feely than the generations before us. I mean, I'm a military brat. I don't think I saw my dad cry once my entire life until, you know, someone close to him died. But it's one of those things where, you know, little things like that, you're not demasculated anymore if you shed a tear at a press conference for a sports team or something like that. So it's more along the lines of we have to evolve with the times. And we haven't. And one of the reasons I think that we haven't is because we don't have the young people in here. So you guys see the catch-22. We need more young people, but we need young people to attract the young people. And so one of the things I think that we need to do is just, we got to sell the industry the way we sell our products and services and everything that we're doing on this side. You know, if that's going to more college campuses and recruiting events and showing people exactly what we're doing on a day-to-day basis and those lives that we're affecting, the people that we're making their lives better. You know, what exactly are we doing to help attract those folks to those opportunities? And I think too, when it comes to personnel, and I'm getting a little bit off on a tangent here, the issue is a little bit twofold, right? Because on the claim side, you know, your insureds, TPAs, payers, whatever, we're looking more for technical expertise and risk management and things like that. Now, we have college programs for that. They can be a little dry, and a lot of times I think they're more attractive to those that are big on math and underwriting and stuff like that. But if you look at the whole spectrum, and if you look at sort of the managed care and the vendor side, and combine that with the payer side, you know, we need everything: operations, customer service, finance, really anything that you can think of that comes with a corporate America position. And we need new salespeople. You know, we need new account reps. We tend to take the easy way out and use retreads in this industry. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that to a certain extent. But when we're only using retreads, when we're only looking at the same people because it's the easier way to hire. There's not as much training that's involved. They know the goings on of the industry. When we're doing that, we're taking that easy way. And instead of sort of investing in training, investing in new talent, how are we supposed to know what sort of practices and theories and cool things might be coming out of academia if we're not pulling people from academia? You know, basically this practice has contributed to that old, rigid, crusty sort of view that people have outside that I was talking about. And the last thing I'll really say on this is, I went and I looked, and I was just really curious as to sort of what the most popular jobs are coming out of college, people that freshly graduate. What are the jobs that we're taking? And I found a top 10 list from 2019, which may not be as relevant considering the COVID and all the kind of stuff we've been through over the last 2 years. But at the same time, looking at these 10 things, I mean, number one, software engineer. We definitely need to update our IT and work on. Then we have registered nurse, salesperson, and from teacher, and then to accountant, project manager, admin assistant, account executive. It goes on and on. Basically, 9 of the 10 positions that kids are coming out of school and wanting to do or entering, we need in our industry, and we're not getting that talent. Other people are getting that talent. We have to attract them here to do what we want them to do. So
I really appreciate everything that you just said. So I would argue that on the claims side, I don't want the technical people. I would rather train the people with, I want the psychology background, the sociology background, the human services, especially the human services and social workers and teachers, because they understand the social determinants of health in a capacity that is really hard to train the technicians who can understand statute. There's just a different philosophy of that. But again, why digress on that? Because that's not part of this. But I do think that there is something different when you look at, well, do you want to come? Laura, I'd use the word examiner. Do you want to become an examiner when you grow up? Oh, that sounds attractive. But you know what? If you want to be a single-handed game changer that makes great things happen for people every time you pick up the phone, that seems a little more attractive. So with the whole idea of words mattering, Mark, you started a campaign on this back in the, what, I was going to say 19. Not what I meant. But
Me and FDR, just like this. Yep.
But you did. When we talk about why words matter, Mark, you had a campaign, you have a hashtag that is hashtag words matter. Talk to me about why words matter.
Well, I think people respond to words, and by using them, they enact what's going on inside your head. So one of the examples that I used to talk about was one of my original business mentors told me that when I was talking to somebody on the phone to smile, and it didn't make any sense at the time because it wasn't like the Jetsons where, you know, video or FaceTime or whatever, they hadn't even invented cell phones at that point. But, you know, it's smile when you, but then when I figured it out, the reason why he shared that with me is if I went through the physical machinations of smiling, it changed my tone. It changed my attitude. The people couldn't see my face, but they could hear the words that I were using. They could hear the tone of voice that I was using, that I was more gracious, that I was more accommodating, that I was willing to listen to them. And when you talk in terms of calling someone a claimant, that's worse than calling someone an examiner, right? I mean, there just isn't really any kind of gravitas associated with that. When you talk in terms of an injured worker, I mean, that's definitive. But does that really talk in terms of who they are as a human being? So, you know, the words matter in regards to, you know, Laura talked about in terms of the litigation, the legislation, the regulation. There's a lot of outdated terms in those, but they are kind of baseline. So that's one of the things when you look at regulation, and I see one of the questions was how can you work with legislators and regulators on this? Well, we got the same old people going in front of legislators and regulators have been doing it the same way, arguing for and against different things. So, you know, there's some people that let's just go ahead and say it. There's some people that need to retire, right? We need to go ahead and we need to kind of get started. You know, that whole Jurassic Park thing that Ron mentioned, right? So when you talk about words matter, we're competing in the marketplace for technology people against .coms. We're competing for HR people for really cool stay-at-home return, you know, work from home. You know, they don't fire 900 people over a Zoom call. You know, you got a variety of things happening. I mean, you got customer service and salespeople. We need those associated with that. So how do we brand ourselves? How do we call attention to ourselves to do that? So, you know, words matter in regards to claimant. Words matter in regards to the biomedical model. I mean, there's so many different things. Return to work. is so important. But I think a lot of people don't understand that return to work is as important, if not as more important, to the injured worker as it is to the employer. The employer definitely wants that person back, but if you look at statistics, mortality increases, your life expectancy decreases when you're not working. Worklessness is a physical comorbidity. So it is as important for someone that they're themselves to get out of the work comp system and return to work as it is important for employers. So imbuing some words that are colorful, that bring to mind, they're self-defining, that bring to mind that this is beyond just ones and zeros and dollars and cents, but these are helping people in challenging circumstances. We got to come up with buzzwords, taglines, logos, branding, all sorts of stuff. When people are looking for jobs, before they fill out a form and before they ghost you, they're probably going to your website. Does your website look like it was made by me back in the 1990s? Or does it look like it was made by people who are actually, 23-year-olds drinking coffee working at a, working from home, doing what? Does it look cool? Does it look inviting? Does it have short and pithy terms? And when you talk about marketing, we're marketing companies, but we need to market work comp too. Think about marketing work comp just like you market your own business. How are you going to draw people? Just like you draw prospects, by creating a compelling argument that hits them where they're at. And oh, by the way, it's not just people inside work comp that we need to recruit. We're dealing with injured workers that also are younger generation, that have expectations. They don't want to wait for a fax. They don't want to wait for an email. They don't want to make a phone call. They want self-service apps that they can download stuff and know at the touch of a button what they're doing. We're dealing with people, we're providing services to people that have expectations that our industry in some ways cannot serve because they don't think that way. So we've got it both ways. We've got to recruit people by marketing and by using words that imbue the bigger picture. But we also need to recognize that our stakeholders also have expectations. And so we need to be able to serve them as they wish to be served.
Awesome. I really appreciate that. I love that you reference a fax as well, because so I've got a work comp claim right now that for my knee that you guys all are aware of. And they're like, hey, you need to go ahead and print out your medical authorization and scan it back to us. And I was like, print where? I print it. I can't digitally sign. And I know the answer to this because every jurisdiction is different, but it made me laugh when I was like, a printer? What?
Well, Claire, if I see a business card with a fax number on it, I immediately toss it because that to me means they are so in the Stone Age. Sorry, Claire, but
QR code on it. It's fine.
But you have your UR. Another most recently, I had a medical provider, which needs to come into today, 21st century. They said, we cannot email you the request for authorization. We need to fax it to you. So we are also dealing with providers that need to upgrade their IT, or again, that is a legislation. That is something they need to be in compliance with. So in order to rebrand our workers' comp, it is working at the legislatures and saying, how are you tying different in the people, all parties involved hands in order for us to humanize, kind of untie our hands so we can humanize this process and eliminate the process. One of the things that we have done with the Insert Tech company, and I'm sorry about this, Claire, that I'm kind of interjected, but I do want to see, amazingly, because I in just a short amount of time from this, for instance, agricultural world, they're putting these actual app iPads doing where it used to be done manually on these, identifying these loss exposures, where it's reducing the incidents or the claims by, I think there's 31% on that. And then we're engaging. We need to engage the insureds. We need to engage the employees as well and advocate. Not only are we advocating, but have the injured employee engage in their care, as well as the employer engage in results. And we can do that through technology as well, so it's today's world. as I shared with you, the aura, how we are sending pictures from, our different families so that we can see their life. Technology is out there. We have these wonderful people out there, and you're right, Scott, we're not promoting ourselves out there as we should be. And I will end it with one little point. I remember when we were becoming self-insured, self-administered, we were a large grocery retail store, and I was, all of a sudden I had to hire all these people. Okay, our CEO said, Laura, I have cashiers, I have district managers, I have business agents, you hire from within. He said, but they need the experience, they need to know the law, they know our business, so but I did hire a couple people that had the work comp claims experience. But it's amazing that if you look internally within your business, that you have great people there that have potential to rise within our industry, as long as someone just looks at them and say, hey, I think that person has all these qualities. So, we're looking to recruit all this talent. Why are we not looking internally and looking at our reps, the people that answer the phone call, the people that process the paper? We may want to look at them because they are interested, but they don't have the designations or the alleged experience per se. We just need people that have compassion and just want to, make it happen. That's it.
Thanks, Laura. So I'm going to shift a little bit and then keep the questions coming. We will answer those here shortly. We're going to move to that, but I want to get to something that I think also plays to the work comp brand that Scott talked about. And also Mark did when they said, hey, go to the website. What's your website look like? Are you a bunch of white guys, old white guys that are sitting up there and you wonder why people don't want to come in? So with that, and if my lovely Vanna will add this statistic for me into the chat, because I want to give that I do have facts behind this. So diversity in the industry, guess what? We are 69% white. So I'm going to ask Ron, you are technically part of the 11%. Welcome to being the token black guy in this industry. What is that experience like? And then Laura, you hit the next box with 7.6%, and you're a woman in an industry that is 52% male. So I'm going to go start with Ron and then Laura.
Well, I think the whole nation is understanding that if your industry or if your company or doesn't have anybody that looks like me, then people aren't going to work there. And I'm not just talking about people like me are not going to work there. I'm saying no one's going to work there, because now that diversity is important to all people, whether you're a white applicant or a Mexican applicant or a black applicant. If you just see, just one race running the universe, you typically want to avoid that company. You typically want to avoid that industry. There's not a lot of people that look like me in our industry. There's definitely not a lot of people that look like me in the roles that I play and in those roles in other companies. It's just a choice. Honestly, at this stage in the game, it is not news or an epiphany for people to realize that, what, we need to kind of shake things up a little bit. We're now beyond the awareness stage, in my opinion. We're just at a choice phase, and those organizations that choose not to do it, it's a conscious choice. If you look at most websites nowadays, most commercials nowadays, even Hollywood, everybody is now saying, okay, we have to have diversity at the front door, right? Not that we have to have it in the window. We need to make sure that we advertise and promote it and make sure that it's something that other people know that it's very important to us as a priority, or else you're just not going to draw the type of people that we're looking to draw. So it's not, it's not a secret. There's not a lot of black people in workers' comp, and where they are, there's not a lot of black people at the higher levels or at the more diverse positions or at the positions that can touch a lot of people. So it's a choice at this point, and I think we as an organization, I think we as a group, I think we as an industry have to make a choice to say we're going to actually do something about it. The awareness was an important step. The whole nation has gone through that awareness over the last 2 years. But now the question is, what are we going to do about it?
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you for answering the question. All right, Miss Laura, you and I have talked about this as well. So I would love your perspective, one as a female and as a Latina female. And we've also talked about hiring practices and some of the algorithms that are used. So can you kind of touch on all of that?
Oh my goodness. Well, first of all, women are if you can see, we can do it back there. Basically, it is Rosie the Riveter that says it's all about that influence, that we can do it. There are a lot of women organizations out in our industry that are actually moving, creating, being champions for other women to move forward and break those, I would say, the concrete ceiling sometimes. It's not necessarily a glass ceiling. And we are being, and I'm seeing champions out there like the transitions, mentoring our youth and women and with other Latinas to say, here's a great industry to come into. It pays well. You learn about wide variety of different subject matters, and it is a place that women are a force to be reckoned. Sadly, though, we have not progressed as much as we would like. There's still the good old boy, nothing to do with the men, but there's still a good old boy type network up above in our boards. In our CEOs, I see very few women as CEOs. I see them as senior vice presidents, but I don't see them as the chief executive officer, the chief, the main player that oversees the entire industry or the entire company. There's still work to be done, but we're working towards there, Claire, and we're making things happen. Okay. Now, why is it that, what's happening? Why is that? I think right now companies use these algorithms, I would say, or some of these. I had a friend of mine who was actually oversaw a large company and said, Laura, I have this friend, and it amazes me that she didn't even go through the interview process. Why is that? When she has all these great qualities, she's perfect. She's the perfect fit. Well, sometimes we create these, utilize these software programs to screen out candidates or basically screen and identify the best talent because we don't have time. Again, in that case, we're using technology to kind of screen applicants. Well, are they the best applicants for you? Where is the human eyes into some of these resumes that you probably screened out and said they're not, well, they didn't use the right keywords. And there's individuals that may not have all those designations because life happened, but yet they would be perfect for a position. They would be perfect. They have the willpower. They're smart. They have, they can make things. If you look at their life in total, they volunteer at nonprofits, they create organizations. They may be the PTA person who has now built all these wonderful fundraisers to, support the school. Yet because that individual doesn't have that those designations, not even considered for one of those C-suite positions, but yet fully capable of being that C-suite person, very capable. All I can say, Claire, is that for me, being Latina, it's been hard. I've had champions. If not for those champions, I would not be where I'm at. So I'm very thankful for those champions that saw my potential. And I have, life has happened, but boy, I am happy where I'm at. And that is because the people had recognized the results, what I'm capable of. And yeah, I'm just very grateful and thankful. So be a champion.
I love that. All right, I'm going to switch. We've got a lot of good questions coming in. So I'm going to take into account some of these awesome questions. So, all All right, let's start at the beginning. Here we go. To the point about legislators and legislation, how do the panelists address the overarching economics of lawmaking where business interests predominate? It can be argued that legislators do not, on their own prerogative, introduce bills without the backing of joint interests. To put more of the human element into a mix that takes a different mindset, how do companies like yours do so? I'll open that up to anybody on the panel.
Well, I have had the opportunity and privilege to lobby in a variety of different jurisdictions over time, as well as be very engaged with IIBC and SACA, where you have direct access to regulators. And one thing, I think regulators really need information that help them make good decisions. And there are people, not everybody has a seat at the table. Not every company is there. Not every perspective is recognized there. So there is some level of privilege in order to kind of reach into the inner sanctum to get there. So we need organizations like IIBC with their next gen program, where they're incorporating the newer folks to be able to have access to those regulators. From a legislator standpoint, the vast majority of legislators have no clue what work comp is. They probably still call it workman's compensation. So they really don't understand. It may be a very small part. If they're a business owner, they may understand it, but they don't understand the implications of it. So from a legislative standpoint, they really need a lot of help to understand nuance. So I think as an industry, we need those folks that interact with regulators to bring on, to Laura's point about championing. If you're a lobbyist, if you're someone who interacts with regulators or legislators, and you're in that demographic of me, we're kind of been there, done that, now it's time to bring that next generation, to introduce them to those people, to start establishing relationships with them. Because my perspective is that if you establish relationships, personal relationships with these people, you can have hard discussions with them and say, this doesn't make sense. Do you understand what the unintended consequences are going to be from this? If you talk with other people in different perspectives. So I think we need to do a concerted effort, back to kind of Ron, of actually strategically kind of thinking through, not hoping something happens, but actually do something. I think we need to work towards getting people from different perspectives, filling different seats at the table, different companies, different complexions, different ethnic backgrounds, different genders, different perspectives of the work comp system, to bring them into that and give those legislators and those regulators a well-rounded conversation. Because oftentimes they hear from the same people over and over and over again, and that doesn't necessarily serve the benefits to the regulators or the legislators to make good, well-rounded decisions. So one call to action, if you're on here and you're a regulator, or if you're on here that you know someone who's a regulator or know someone who's a lobbyist, find somebody of that next generation, that's someone that maybe doesn't look like you or think like you or doesn't operate in the same aspect of workers' comp like you, and bring them to the table. Give them an ability to establish those relationships with the legislators and regulators, because that's the only way they get their information.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. Why are we letting medical treatment modalities get in the way of connecting with humans and solving their work disability problem?
Again, it's, the American, I'm not a physician. I wish I think this would be more of a Ron question, but I will, or Scott question.
Yeah, no, so I think part of it has to do with what we just talked about, is the legislation. I mean, we're dealing with 50 different jurisdictions with 50 different sets of guidelines, whether it's medical treatment guidelines or whatever, what they can and can't do when it comes to treatment, who they can and can't see. I mean, so unfortunately, the technical aspect of this is always going to be in the way of the proper medical treatment. What's the most cost effective? Who's the most efficient vendor? What's the doctor that's actually going to take comp? I mean, so the unfortunate is we built this rat's nest of a system that we just have to sort of deal with. And until we go to a single payer across the board, one jurisdiction in work comp, which I don't see coming anytime soon, it's unfortunately just the playground that we have to play in.
Mm-hmm.
I always say vote. Find out who your legislator is. You need to go out and vote. It is sad to say that less than 50, 60% sometimes actually vote for someone, so vote. 2, there are scorecards. There are many organizations out there that have a scorecard on your legislator and how they're voting. 3, write to them. I write to my legislator all the time about certain things that I may not be happy with, but I'm engaged. So how do we start changing some of these processes? By being engaged, actively engaged in the who is representing you, saying your verbiage. There's also several organizations out there that represent the injured worker, represent, have the different interests as well, that you can share some of your thoughts, insights. It's always welcome. That's the nice thing about it. And yes, I love what Scott said. It is we need to change it, period. This is what we have, but we can't change it.
Well, if nothing changes, nothing changes, right? And what can we do in the meantime? Because changing legislators, okay, good luck with that one. That's bigger than I can even process in my head. You just made my brain explode thinking about that one. But what can we do in the meantime? I know there's a lot of organizations that aren't sitting on their hands. I know one organization that we work with that they built an entire onboarding effect for the injured worker, regardless of the TPA, regardless of this, regardless of that. They have said we're going to hire and retain a staff that talks to every single injured worker that gets injured and make sure that we're providing a concierge service to our employees, because they don't even call them injured workers; they call them employees. We all know Steve Biggs at Chick-fil-A, and the way he thinks about the world and the way that company thinks about the world says, okay, I'm not one of those people that are blinded by fake savings. I don't care about your fake savings. Tell me how you're going to affect our employees. Tell me how you're going to help our employees. We talked to another group that is doing a survey after every single injured worker claim is closed. They do a survey of that from the injured worker to say, tell me about your experience. Tell me about what happened. And they take the output of that. If nothing changes, nothing changes. There are things we can do and act today that will help us take steps in the right direction. And you're right, Laura, I love your use of technology, because you can utilize technology. I mean, let's face it, our injured workers know more about the turn by turn of an Uber than what's happening with their own treatment. Right? They can know exactly where that car is picking them up. They have no idea what's going on with their prescriptions. They have no idea what's going on with their treatment. They have no idea. So there's a lot of things we can do as an industry while we wait on the legislators to actually do something great. That companies are just going ahead and doing. And we just need to get on board with that and make that more of the standard, make that more of the conversation, as opposed to just sitting back and waiting.
So Mark, we need to go, I was going to say, Mark, we need to go from Star Trek to the Galaxy Edge. And that's what the technology does,
Well, and just one point of clarification, we've used the term legislators. Legislators pass law, but regulators are the ones that interpret the laws and create the regulations that actually create the process that we have to live by. So yes, there is a need to engage with legislators, but the regulators are really the ones that are the closest to the wheel in regards to defining how we do work comp. But they establish a baseline. To Ron's point, they've established kind of the standard operating procedure. That doesn't mean that as long as you live within the confines, you don't have to live within the confines. You just have to build on that foundation. So be active and take that as a starting point. Take the regulations as a starting point, and then build upon that what works best for your business model and your stakeholders.
Awesome. Well, we are coming up to the hour, and so I'm going to finalize kind of like what we did with introductions. Give me a takeaway, but I'm going to use it with the question that was asked earlier. It says, one old horse wants what you want, but the inertia needs to be overcome. How do you do that? And we'll close it out starting by Mark. You have 15 seconds. How does the inertia need to be overcome? From your seat, how do you do that?
First step. And I think that you don't worry about the ultimate destination. You worry about that first next step, and worry about your personal actions. Don't worry about the macro. Don't worry about what your company, don't worry about what the industry's doing. Worry about what you're doing. And if you make a change and you make a difference and you incorporate that philosophy in the way that you do it, it's going to be catchy.
Awesome. Ron.
You know, I would say stand your ground. One of the things I have been most impressed with you, Dr. Claire, and people like Josh Diggs and other people in the industry that are shaking things up is that they're standing their ground. They're standing behind a strong message that says we have to do things differently. And yeah, that may alienate some people that want to do things the same old way and put the same old square peg in the same old square hole 1,000 times a day and just leave it as it is because somebody is benefiting from that methodology. Somebody's gaining revenue from that methodology. I get that. But I think you create inertia by getting enough people standing their ground and saying, we're going to do it differently. And if that attracts you, then yes. If that doesn't attract you, then keep doing things the same old way, because I think the pendulum is shifting. And I think those that hold on to the status quo, I mean, none of us go home and tell our kids, hey, I want you to be status quo today. This is what I want you to do. That's not what we go home and tell our kids, right? We go home and tell our kids to do something different and to do it better. And I think stand your ground. Just keep doing what you're doing. Make a difference. Each and every person that's listening to this broadcast can say, I can go do something today and I can stand my ground and do something different.
Thank you. Laura.
Human connection from day one with all parties involved. That's what I love, is that it's all about that human connection. And so, you know, day one, and each day, even though it's the second day, go back to day one. For whatever reason, we do great things on day one, but we forget about continuing to do that day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5. So make each day day one every time you touch somebody.
Wonderful. And last but not least, Mr. Yasko. And now you have your pep talk for your girls basketball teams. Don't be status quo.
Yeah, don't be status quo. I'm definitely going to use that one. That's great. They'll probably look at me and say, what does that mean? Anyway, no, so to sort of get momentum, I think there's two things that we can do. One's very simple. It's also a little bit out there. And I'm going to take a play from Bob Wilson's playbook. I mean, we got to change. Words do matter. We got to change the terminology. Workers' compensation sounds like it's got a negative connotation to it, whether it's throughout the years, whether it's feel if you're owed something, whatever the case may be. Why not worker recovery? At the end of the day, that's what we're doing. You know, that's the end goal. We want these workers to recover. We want these people to get back to work. We want them to get back to their lives. So let's change it from the start. Let's change it from work comp to work recovery. It's not as crazy as people might think it sounds. I mean, that's number one. And number two, I think getting the right people in places of power, getting decision makers in. Again, this is a little bit more of a down the road type thing, but we need people in the right seats that can make the right decisions to put this industry in the right direction.
Awesome. Well, I would like to thank my amazing panel. The reason I chose these people are because they are all different and it matters. And these are the people that are driving a lot of meaningful and effective and efficient change in the industry. And so I want to thank each of you for being here. If you're interested in learning more about the transitions, please visit us at thetransitions.org. You can check us out at WCI next week. Mark, I cannot remember what booth we're in, but we have a booth.
1026.
Thank you, 1026, not near the puppies, but we will be there. And also, if you're interested in becoming a mentor or a mentee, you can join the Transitions Mentorship Program, and all of that information can be found on our website. This has been recorded, so you can share with all of your friends, family, colleagues, etc., or use it as a motivational speech for your children on how to not be average. With that, I'll say thank you. Have a lovely afternoon. Happy holidays.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.